It all started a few months ago, around her birthday. Claire came home from work and was smelling like Axe body spray. At first, I brushed it off. Not my wife. She loves me. We have been faithful to each other for years. But then the doubt started to creep in. I've had to start working late shifts, weekends too, since we have been behind on our mortgage. My time at home has been literally less than 5 or 6 hours a day, and most of that time was spent asleep. But she rarely complained. In fact, most of the time she seemed happier when I left. Then one day I tried to kiss her on the neck and I saw a blemish there, as though someone else's lips had touched her skin. My first mistake was confronting her head on about it. Of course she denied. She yelled. She called me a bad guy. Typical cheater behavior. Worst of all, she got what she wanted. Insisted I start sleeping downstairs and saying that we needed separation, maybe even a divorce. All I got out of it was desperation and depression. She insisted that she was still faithful to me, but all the signs were there. I just didn't have any proof to back it up. What you need is a security system for your home, my buddy Chad said one night when I went to drink away my troubles. When did she realize what I got it for? I pointed out. So don't tell her. Wait until she's out of the house and make it discreet, camera and the smoke alarm, shit like that. He said as he downed his whiskey. His half-brained scheme didn't sound that bad, and I knew that Claire had said she was going to spend the next few days at her mother's house to supposedly let things cool down between us. If I was going to get to the bottom of this, it was now or never. So that's what I did. As soon as I knew that she was gone, I contacted a local shop and had them come that afternoon. The technician didn't ask any questions, just put them exactly where I wanted them, and threw in one of those doll cams as an extra bonus. I gave it to Claire as a peace offering, saying that I was sorry for the accusations. Sounds stupid, I know. What are the chances she would even leave that doll around to let me listen in on her? But then I know my wife. She is sweet and kind and loving, sure, but she is also very predictable. She put the stuffed doll exactly where I thought she would. I let a few more days pass, keeping things amicable between us as I went to and from work. Then the next time I was off, when she again insisted that she didn't want to spend any time with me alone, I went to check the cameras. Finally, I could get the answers I was looking for. The grainy tape started up about 13 minutes past 7 the previous night. That was about a half hour after I left for work. I saw my wife sitting there on the bed, wearing nothing but a sheer robe, staring at the ceiling. At first, I puzzled over what she might be doing. She was perfectly still, her back turned against the camera. As she took off her robe, and what I saw looked like little marks on the edge of her shoulders. Then I saw a man enter the picture, and knew I was right. She placed him on the bed, ready to mount him, and I almost wanted to turn and look away, disgusted with what she was about to do. Then, to my amazement, I watched as those little bumps began to gently push her skin outward. At first, it wasn't noticeable, just a slow curling of her back. Then suddenly the movement quickened, and large pieces of bone broke out on either side. They made a cracking noise as I heard my wife scream out. I don't know if it was a sound of pleasure or pain. The bones pushed to the side and started to form sinew and stretch the skin to its limits. I realized that they were forming what appeared to be wings. Her lean form bent over towards the man that she had been seducing for that night, and I watched in abject horror as her mouth widened to reveal rows of sharp teeth, more than even a shark might have. Her lover's screams were now the ones that filled the void of the room. Blood splattered on the clean sheets, muscles and skin ripped apart like wrapping paper. Her fingers gnawing into his open chest cavity like claws as she ripped out his beating heart and then began to chew it like a piece of jerky. Her wings spread wide as she lifted her meal from the bed, moving him to the floor right in front of the camera to finish him off. I don't know how long she continued to eat. I couldn't bear to watch any longer. Then I looked towards the room in confusion, trying to understand how it's possible for the video to correlate with my pristine room. I never knew her to be a good cleaner, and surely there had to be some evidence of the bodies she had likely disposed of time and time again. Then I heard noises behind me. I turned to see her standing there. She saw me looking at the footage, and I'm certain that if I could see my face, it was probably paler than a ghost. Without a word, Claire crossed the room and looked down at the doll, playing with the strings like a cat plays with the ball of yarn. Then she crushed it slowly in her hand. It took less than a few seconds for her to reduce it to rubble. Moving to the bed, she crossed her legs and smiled at me, the same way she had when we first started dating. "So, what happens now?" she asked. I found myself at a loss for words. Then I finally went over towards her and smiled nervously, remembering the other cameras in the house, remembering that she didn't know what I had seen, or if I had saved anything. I get everything in the divorce, or I will leak what I have all over the internet to every priest, demon hunter, and damn X-File junkie there is. Are we clear? I said with the best poker face I could muster. I knew she could kill me in a heartbeat, but I also know that if that was her goal, she would have done that years ago. She needed me. For what I don't know, but all she did was nod and kiss me slowly. "It was fun while it lasted, wasn't it?" she asked as she got up from the bed. I never saw her again after that night, and I hope I never do. Oh, and one more thing. I don't think I'm ever gonna uninstall these cameras. I long for the nights where my mother would don an evening gown, punctuate every sentence of her lecture with the clicks and the clacks of her high heels as she strutted to the door and left a deep red imprint of her lips on my forehead before she allowed herself to be whisked away by her suitor of the night. Those nights were rare when your single mother works 12-hour shifts at a local nursing facility and comes back home to a long evening of drinking, loud television, and heated arguments with her children. This night was better than all the others because the universe had aligned the plans of everyone in our household to collide, leaving me behind for at least 5 hours worth of quiet alone time, something I rarely got. I was in my bedroom, my secret stash of snacks scattered all over my bed, and the one shared laptop we had in the house, all to myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do first. Watch a movie? Sing along to karaoke songs on YouTube? Have a one-woman dance party? I settled upon watching a scary movie and turned off all the lights to set the mood. I was barely past the 30-minute mark when I heard a distant sound of snickering. For a few seconds, I convinced myself that it was just background noise in the movie that I was watching, but my reassurance faltered when I paused the film and still heard it. I was frozen in place. I didn't know what to do. I just waited for something to happen, but nothing did. I slowly shifted my position. The bed frame creaked under my weight as I did so. I planted both feet on the ground and paused for a few minutes. It was most likely one of my siblings who had came back early and was playing a prank on me, or it could have been one of the neighborhood kids. Whoever it was, I was a 16-year-old girl who wasn't taking any chances. I finally had the mind to scan the room for anything that I could use to defend myself. I shared my room with 6 and 8-year-old girls. The entire place was childproof, and my best bet was a heavy sports trophy, but I figured that it was better than nothing. The snickering got louder and nearer. It turned into chuckles. I didn't know whether I wanted to wait in here until I was found, or to do the finding myself. I took another long, hard look at the trophy in my hands, and decided to wait. With each minute that had passed, the laughter increased in volume and enthusiasm. It sounded like a child who knew his parents were heading towards his hiding spot during a game of hide and seek, laughing with the voice of an adult. Then I heard what sounded like chairs being dragged across the hardwood floor. It didn't sound like it was with much purpose other than to clear them out of the way. A slippery, slobbery, wet noise followed suit. It sounded familiar, yet it wasn't one that I had particularly heard before. Whoever was in the kitchen was slamming, ripping apart and mushing whatever it had in its hands. I heard squishes and squeals, and I could only assume it was some sick psychopath with a fetish of breaking into houses and mutilating large animals. Whatever it was, he was laughing throughout. I was terrified. There was a stranger in my kitchen laughing manically as he seemingly prepared himself a snack on the counter. There was an intruder in the downstairs of my house, the place where I had left my cell phone. I turned around to look at my laptop, wondering if the police would be able to respond to emails. I decided to give it a try anyways, and tiptoed back to my bed. My trembling fingers struggled to type slowly and quietly, but I eventually managed to send an email and post for help on social media. An excruciating 7 minutes passed until I heard someone pull up in the driveway. It didn't sound like the police though. I heard the sounds of heavy footsteps running up the front door, frantically jamming a key into the keyhole and swinging the door open. The laughter stopped for a brief second before it turned back into a roaring guffaw. A shriek and an ear-piercing scream penetrated the silence of the neighborhood, and whoever produced it turned around and ran towards the street, taking their screams with them. The manic laughter followed suit, and I finally dared to run to my bedroom window. I saw my sister running down the street while screaming, trying to attract as much attention as she could. By the looks of it, she was succeeding. Running in the opposite direction was a naked man covered in a massive amount of blood that I had only seen before on television. He was still roaring with laughter as he disappeared out of sight. I watched out the window as a posse gathered just outside my house. My sister hadn't stopped screaming. I realized that she wasn't trying to attract attention, but she was actually hysterical, and I did not want to go downstairs to greet whatever had brought my sister to such a state. The crowd grew larger as flashing red and blue lights arrived and the footsteps stormed into my house. I heard curses and wretches downstairs before someone finally called out. All I could manage to produce at first was a squeak. A female police officer appeared in my doorway and asked me if I was alright. She told me to follow her with my eyes closed. Great advice for a rebellious teenager. I noticed her grasp become tighter when we reached the bottom of the stairs, and I couldn't help treating myself to a peek. Through squinted eyes, I saw dismembered body parts of my mother neatly arranged beside her decapitated head on the kitchen counter. I passed out. 47 minutes. That's how long I spent listening to my mother being torn into, ripped apart, mutilated, and eaten. The person responsible for that ran straight to his nursing facility, straight to his bedroom, and straight into bed. He laughed as they restrained him to his bed. He laughed as he was taken away in cuffs. He laughed as he was locked up in a cell. He laughed as he made eye contact with me in the courtroom as his sentence was being announced. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still laughing when I strapped him to the chair. He will never laugh again, nor will my mother. So what do you make of it? I asked the plumber, Steve. I believe his name was Steve. Sure as hell looks like blood to me, he said, staring at the rusty red discharge dripping down the wall. But I'm no biochemist or anything. My wife had jokingly referred to it as blood, so that's the first thing I told the plumber. You know, as a joke. Hey Plumber Steve, we've got a really bad case of the old blood dripping down the walls here. Mind taking a look? You're kidding, right? I stared at him in disbelief. He seemed like the kind of guy that would think this kind of stuff was funny. You know, stupid. I don't know, man. He stroked his chin nonchalantly. The color checks out. It is roughly the same texture, wouldn't you say? This guy, I thought to myself. I'm not even sure why I called the plumber in the first place. The weird thing was, there weren't any pipes anywhere near that wall in question. I'd gone over every inch of the place, read through all the blueprints, even drilled a hole at the base of the roof. There was simply nothing there. Maybe you got a corpse or something up there. He chuckled nervously. Have you checked on your wife lately? I really do hate bad comedians. They're right up there with people who use waltz instead of wile, and people who chew with their mouth open. I just shook my head and snickered half-heartedly. So there's nothing you can do? I asked. Hey man, if there's no pipe or hole or anything I can enter. He winked suggestively, then shrugged. I sighed and thanked him for the service to my basement, which is to say I told him he was useless. He replied with a douchey smirk, then handed me a bill that had me reconsidering my chosen career. No luck? My wife asked. I shook my head. I just don't get it, I said. This shouldn't be fucking rocket surgery. I think you mean brain science, she giggled. But I'll admit, it's pretty damn weird. We'd only had this house for a little over a week, but I was already regretting buying it. Sure, it was relatively cheap. Who doesn't love a big old mortgage? But there had been nothing but problems with it since we moved in. Lights flickering, drafty spots all over, strange noises in the wall, and then the leak in the basement yesterday to top it all off. And don't even get me started on the neighbors. Maybe we should talk to the neighbors, my wife suggested, peering out the kitchen window. Which one? I asked. Let's see, we've got a big old weirdo, the demented old crone, the blonde surfer guy with the seemingly endless supply of identical white hoodies. Or let's not forget the creepy middle-aged twins. Come on, she poked me in the ribs, playfully. Stop being a grump. I'm sure they're nice people. I managed to dodge them all thus far. I heard someone knocking on the door like crazy once, but I was half asleep from the full night of failing to locate the damn sound in the walls. So I buried my head under the pillow and ignored whoever it was. I suppose I couldn't avoid them forever though. That's not the neighborly thing to do, I guess. I'm sure, I replied sarcastically. Hey, shouldn't you be at work? Just heading out now. She kissed me on the cheek. Love you. Don't go crazy down in the basement, you hear? No promises. I smiled, but I'll try. My wife worked wacky shifts. I guess that's what nurses do. I couldn't keep on top of her crazy work schedule half the time, so I often found myself confused when I woke up and she wasn't there, or when she suddenly came home in the middle of the night. I mostly worked remotely, short-term freelance contracts, which basically meant whenever I felt like it. I hadn't been feeling like it since we bought this damned house, which was becoming something of an issue. It has to be the foundation, right? I muttered to myself, bringing my coffee downstairs with me. I fixated on the wall, and the noises. Couldn't seem to let them go. The basement was fairly small and cramped, and we were originally going to use it for storage. That's why I had to fix a leak post-haste, lest all our useless crap that we never used would be rendered unusable. Maybe rusty water? I suggested, carefully balancing my coffee down the uneven stairs. I stopped abruptly on the last step, spilling my coffee all over myself. Normally I would have shrieked in a rather unmanly fashion as a burning hot liquid ran down my leg, but in this instance, the shock of what I was seeing far outweighed the physical pain. The wall was so squeaky clean, not a single spot on it. I carefully put down the remnants of my coffee on the stairs and walked over to investigate the impossibility of it. But before I got more than a few steps, the one light bulb hanging from the ceiling started flickering like crazy before completely going dark moments later. Son of a bitch, I mumbled, stumbling around blindly, knocking over several boxes of God knows what. The doorbell suddenly rang from upstairs. I must have knocked over every last thing in the basement in a fit of panic before I finally found the stairs, knocking over my coffee cup in the process. Fucking shit, I shrieked unmanly as the hot coffee spilled over my feet. You alright there, fella? A cheery male voice called from the darkness of the basement. Holy shit, I yelled, instinctively turning towards the sound, which in turn led me tumbling down the stairs, landing flat on my back. You know? A pair of floating, glowing emerald eyes uttered. I know who used to live here. Who the fuck is there? I demanded. Get the fuck out of my house. I do apologize, the eyes chuckled. I keep forgetting you needed light to see. The light bulb lit up, flickering erratically like a seizuring strobe light. Every split second or so, illuminating a slender man wearing jeans and a white hoodie. He was grinning widely, his sparkling green eyes darting all over the basement. Hey, you're the surfer guy, neighbor? Spot on, he smiled, although I haven't surfed in quite some time. I hope you don't mind, but I figured I'll let myself in, since you seemed rather preoccupied. He paced around the room idly, gracefully avoiding the shit I knocked over without even looking. How the hell did you get down here so fast? And how did I not hear you coming down the stairs? He hung himself, the man said. The previous owner. Right over there. See? He was pointing at a spot in the corner of the room. I squinted and blinked feverishly, like I somehow expected to see him dangling there. Did you somewhat expect to see him dangling there? The man chuckled. I'm sorry, you'll just have to take my word for it. I sat up uncomfortably, my back digging into the lower step of the stairs. I couldn't think of anything to say. What do you say to a person who manifests out of thin air in your basement? Can you maybe fix the light? I said, shielding my eyes from the seizure-inducing blinking. The man laughed and slapped his forehead theatrically. Why, of course, I always forget these silly little things. He snapped his fingers and the light instantly stabilized. I swallowed deeply as his gleaming green gaze settled on me. I'm here about your plumbing, so to speak, he said, pointing to the wall. I've been told you're having some issues with blood flooding your basement. You know the stuff, right? Thick crimson liquid, usually confined inside of a body. I said, yeah, I mean, it's not blood. That was just a joke, and it's not there now, so I guess it's fixed. Are you sure? He said, grinning widely. Maybe you should take another look. I glanced at the wall in question and let out another unmanly shriek as I realized it was literally covered in deep red oozing sludge flowing incessantly from a single point close to the ceiling all the way down to the floor. There has to be a couple gallons worth, the man said, stroking his chin. Quite a mess. Should see a plumber about that. I edged back against the stairs. Isn't that why you're here? I asked. Oh yeah, you're right. He threw his head back and laughed. I'm here to remind you. Remind me? Of what? I murmured. That you already know where it comes from, fella. You've always known. Just take some digging is all. You keep locking it away. I don't understand. Oh, you will, he grinned, his emerald eyes burrowing into mine. Come on, buddy, let's go see your wife. She'll show you. He sauntered past me and beckoned for me to follow him as he started ascending the stairs. You coming or what? He asked. I haven't got all damn day. My wife? Desha? I said, shifting restlessly. She's at work. The man shrugged and smiled. You sure about that? He said. You sure she didn't come home while you were sleeping? Sleeping? No. It was midday, wasn't it? The plumber came around noon, and she left for work an hour or so later. There's no way in hell I spent that long in the basement. Ah, I see what's going on. The man slapped his forehead again. It's the temporal thingy messing with you. Yeah, it will do that sometimes. Some algorithmic snafu or other. I need to talk to the engineers about that. What damnation are you talking about? I said. Temporal thingy? He laughed again, a long hearty laugh. Nicely put, Wolfgang, he said, but it's easier if I show you. He put his hands into his pockets and whistled cheerfully as he skipped up the remaining steps, disappearing through the door moments later. Last call, he yelled. I'm a busy man, got places to burn, people to eat. You know how it is. I sat for a while in the dim light, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. There was no such thing as sense, of course. Everything that was happening since the plumber left defied logic and reason, but somehow it all seemed so familiar, like I'd seen it happen before. I sighed deeply and followed him up to the first floor. There you are, Woofy boy. He grinned as I emerged through the door. I was just about to call off our arrangement, but I'm glad you came to your senses. Arrangement? I asked, staring up at the impossibly imposing figure before me. Come on, he said. He gave me a pat on the back. I shuddered as the freezing cold fingers dug into my flesh, if only a brief moment. A trip down memory lane is required. I followed him through the kitchen and into the hallway, momentarily losing focus when I noticed how utterly dark it was outside. Then regaining it again when I spotted a massive hole in the wall just outside the living room. I stood in absolute silence, just staring at it. It wasn't there before, was it? No, definitely not. I would have remembered that man-sized hole in the wall, surely. That's not something you just forget. You couldn't figure it out, could you? He said, peering into the hole. Where the sounds came from? Rats in the walls? Wolves in the walls? Couldn't sleep? Couldn't eat? Couldn't leave it alone? Just had to fix it. No, that's... I said, blinking erratically. That's not what happened. That's not true. Sure it is, Wolfie. Sure it is, he said darkly, staring at me. You went all Looney Tunes when you couldn't eat your cereal in peace and tore into the wall with a sledgehammer. I mean, I get it. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, after all. No, I didn't. I edged back, confused. I mean, I can't remember. I can't. The thing is, Wolfie, he said, it's dangerous to tear down walls when you don't know what you're doing. Some of those suckers are load-bearing, you know? Sure, it might be structurally sound for a little while, but imagine your wife coming home in the dead of the night, all tired and grumpy from a long strenuous shift. Then she notices there's a giant flipping hole in the wall, and she's like, what in the everlasting damnation has Wolfie been up to? And pops in to take a gander, and bumps into the wrong thing, and then, boom. The roof suddenly collapsed on her squishy body, splitting her skull open like a ripe melon, blood steadily flowing into a pool in the corner, slowly seeping down, down. Oh man, wouldn't that be something? I swallowed deeply, tears manifesting in my eyes out of nowhere, my hands trembling like crisp autumn leaves, heart pounding out of my chest. No, I murmured weakly. It couldn't. That's not what happened. The man snickered and pointed to the hole. Just one way to find out, Wolfie boy, he said. Just take a quick look, and then we can talk. It only took a moment for me to peer into the hole, but it was the longest moment of my life. Dust swirled in hypnotizing patterns within the small cramped hole, and in the corner I saw a massive pile of rubble, bricks, boards, nails, a pair of unnaturally pale feet sticking out, wearing Dash's shoes that I got for her on her birthday that year when they were on sale, so cheap, half price. And the blood, oh my god, the blood, so much blood, oceans of it splitting off into creeks, rivers, all leading to the corner, seeping down. No, I cried. Dasha, no. Please God, no. I don't know why, but I started clearing the debris, diving onto the pile, throwing stones and bricks and boards every which way. She was long dead. Every last part of me knew that. But it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to be sure. Gotta be sure. Can't let there be a doubt. It's my fault. My fault. My God. Oh, Dasha. It's all my fault. It is your fault, the man chuckled. That's how these things usually go, Wolfie boy. Guilt, despair, damnation, anguish, all the sweet emotions you mistake for love. It's not love, Wolfgang. It's self-preservation. You can't handle the pain, so you come to me for the absolute solution. Shut up, I yelled. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Excuse me? He held up his hand dramatically. Just spitting the truth over here. Didn't mean anything by it. Let me know when you're ready to talk about our arrangement. I collapsed on the pile, sobbing inconsolably. Arrangement? I sniffed. What do you mean? He laughed heartily. Wolfgang, how have you not caught on yet? I'm a dealmaker by trade. Surely you've gathered that much by now. You mean... I dried my tears and stared at him. You mean you can save her? Oh, I do apologize, he said, grinning widely. You still seem to be under the impression that this is the first time we're having this conversation. This one is on me, Wolfie boy. Temporal snafu and all. What do you mean? I yelled hysterically. Can you just fucking tell me already? He crouched down in front of me. This isn't our first talk, Wolfgang. In fact, I've lost count, but I'm guessing we're up to hundreds by now. It always ends the same, but I do like to check up on my clients, you know, in case they're experiencing dealer's remorse. What talk? I whispered. What are you offering me? He laughed again. Your wife, sweet perfect Dasha, of course. I can give her back, just like that. He snaps his fingers. But there's a catch. Always a catch. I sat up, meeting his unflinching gaze. "What?" I asked. "My soul? You want my soul? Just take it." "Whatever would I do with that?" he chuckled. "Then what? What do you want?" "It's real simple," he said. "You can have a glimpse of her, a few minutes every morning before she leaves for work. That's all. Some back and forth banter, a kiss on the cheek, then a goodbye. And then you'll wake up, discovering her body all mashed up to a tasty, sludgy corpse juice. Go through all this again. All the horror, the guilt, the pain, all the suffering. All that for 5 minutes of her. Hardly seems worth it, does it?" I nodded weakly. "It's worth it," I said. "It will be worth it. It will always be worth it." "Well then," he grinned, "who am I to stand in the way of your perpetual self-inflicted torment?" He grabbed my hand and shook it vigorously. "I'll see you tomorrow, Wolfie boy," he said. "Always a pleasure." He disappeared into the hole without a sound, leaving me a sobbing, convulsing mess on top of the crushed corpse of my wife. "My sweet, perfect Dasha, I'll never let you go. I'll always choose the agony. There is no compromise, no option, no other way. Before I go back, before I lose myself, I have to remind myself, have to remember, always remember, never let it go, never let her go. It is worth it. It is worth it." My father is the scariest man I've ever known, and when armed with a bottle of beer, he reaches nightmare levels. Just the crackle of his belt or the rise of his voice is enough to make me shake like a leaf. One night, when I struggled to get comfortable in bed from the bruises and sounds of my mom's crying, I hatched an ingenious idea to stop the pain and suffering. Scare Dad. Clearly, he just didn't know how his actions made us feel, but if I scared him like he scared us, maybe he would change his ways. I tried anything I could think of to produce some fright and scare Dad straight. I would hide and jump out at him, but he didn't even flinch. I placed a toy snake in his toilet, but that only resulted in a beating for me. Finally, I thought of destroying his alcohol. I know that people become scared when they lose something they love. So one by one, I poured my dad's bottles down the drain and eagerly awaited his reaction. I knew this would be it. This would be the thing to scare him. That night, I remember my father discovering the empty bottles and becoming angrier than I had ever seen him. I still remember him wrecking the house. I remember him storming into my room. I remember his hands around my neck and me seeing black. Luckily, my plan and hard work that night paid off though. Today my father lives in a constant state of fear. I'm always watching him. How timid and nervous he is all the time. Whenever I pay him a visit, his complexion turns pasty white. His body shivers like I used to, and he breaks out into a cold sweat. I scared my father so good, you would think that he saw a ghost. I couldn't believe it when I first discovered the online chats. My little girl talking with a random man on the internet. I felt my soul leave my body. I thought I raised her better, but in hindsight, I guess I should have been more observant. She's grown distant since the divorce, and maybe this is her way of receiving validation. I knew I had to do something drastic before this escalated and something despicable happened to my baby. I knew I couldn't confront her head on with this discovery. She's a teenager, and surely a confrontation would just lead her to keeping more secrets and dissolving trust over my snooping. I had a plan to scare her straight and show her the danger involved with talking to strangers online. I cut a deal with an employee at my company to create an account and contact my daughter on one of those online forums. Once they hit it off, he would pick her up and bring her to one of our warehouses. He would build up the suspense as a cliche older creep, really put the fear of God in her. Then I would swoop in and point out how the consequences of her reckless actions could be deadly. The plan was executed to perfection, and after a few days my daughter agreed to meet up. She thought she was stealthy and snuck out at night to meet this stranger. I waited a few minutes and proceeded to make my way towards the warehouse. When I arrived, I saw my daughter exiting the building. She was pale as a ghost and wiping away tears. I had my grin as I got out of the car and approached her. "Dad," she yelped as she ran towards me full speed. "I'm sorry, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I actually did something like this. Can you please not tell anyone about this?" I felt a sense of beaming pride. My little girl had learned a valuable lesson, and in this moment, our relationship felt restored. "Baby girl, all I care about is your safety. Promise me you'll never do anything like this again, and we can pretend it never happened." She shot me a smile and nodded. I started to move towards the car when she stopped me. "You're the best dad a girl could ask for, but we can't leave yet, Daddy. You have to help me hide the body." A few nights ago, I was woken up by the sound of my father ordering someone to put their hands up. I'd left my window open that night to let the cool air in, and I could hear him loud and clear. I hopped out of bed and was looking out my window. Someone had been in our barn, and my dad caught them red-handed. In fact, when I ran outside after grabbing a flashlight and my pistol, both of the man's hands were red, his face too, fresh blood, but none of it his. "What the hell are you guys doing in there?" my father said, aiming his shotgun right at the man's face. No, not man, boy. He looked like he had barely hit puberty. The boy's eyes started welling up. Please don't fucking shoot me. Jesus Christ, my parents have money. I'm sure they'll pay you and you can forget all about this. God, I'm so sorry, please." My dad looked back and we shared a knowing glance. "So you're from that prep school. Okay. You would rather not feel what a face of birdshot feels like. I hear you. What were you just doing in my goddamn barn?" "Oh my God, I'm fucking sorry." The boy fell to his knees. "It was a hazing thing, I swear. My dad told me that I had to join the secret club in school, and they said I needed to prove myself." "By doing what?" I asked. "Something bad," he admitted. "They told me to kill something. I swear it was quick. I just used the blood to make it look bad, so they would let me in." "Who'd you kill?" my dad asked, taking a step towards the boy for emphasis. "One of your horses. I promise I'll pay you for it. I'm good for it, really." I didn't know whether I bought it until I saw the boy had pissed his pants. "Dad, this is way over our heads. Secret clubs for rich psychos? I think we should just take the money before he shits himself too." He looks back, considering it for a moment. "Fine, double what the horse is worth. Pain and suffering and all that. Deal." The boy left his student ID behind his collateral and promised to return the next evening with the money. He never showed. The next night, though, we found him in the barn again. His throat was slit, a deep cut nearly halfway around his neck. The knife was left next to the body, now surrounded by the blood that drained out of him. The boy was all tied up, zip ties keeping his hands behind his back and his ankles together. He would have been helpless when they stuck the needle through his lips over and over again, sewing them shut. I didn't need the note they stapled to his chest to understand. The message was loud and clear before I even read the paper. Forget about us. After spending yet another day at home with nothing to do, I went to bed early. The uneasy rest was interrupted by a shattering of glass. The electronic awareness of fear pulled me out of bed before I was even sure of what I heard. I ran softly to my bedroom door, making sure it was still locked, and I pressed my ear against it. From the direction of the living room, I heard crunching of glass. Someone had broken one of my windows and now was walking on the shards. Someone was in my house. I returned to my bed, trying in vain to stop myself from panicking. I immediately began to call 911, holding up the phone with one hand, while the other one searched my nightstand for something to defend myself with. I picked up my lamp, nearly dropping it as the cord tensed, and used my foot to pull the plug from the wall. The automated system warned me that there was a high volume of calls and asked me to stay on the line if there was an emergency. I wondered, for the first time, what the home invaders' intentions were. Did they want to hurt me? Were they out to steal my valuables? Did they want to raid my toilet paper supply? Nothing was off the table. People have been crazy lately. I stayed away from the door, putting safety above curiosity that told me to try hearing what they were up to again. After a minute of terrified silence, the emergency operator finally took my call. I whispered the details to them, including my name and address, and they told me that help was on the way before hanging up. After I set the phone down, I heard the handle of my bedroom door jiggle. "Open the door," a man's gruff voice called out. "We know you're in there." "I called the police, assholes," I yelled back, "so you better get the fuck out of here." The man laughed lightly. "Careful," he said simply. "I don't want to make a mess, but if you force my hand, open the door." "Fuck you," I yelled back. I waited for an answer and got nothing. The piercing silence rang in my ears, and I wondered if he had actually given up that easily. Then, almost without a sound, the handle began jiggling again. After a few clicks and scrapes, the door unlocked and slowly began to open. I watched in horror as it swung into the room, revealing nothing but the shadow beyond the new open doorway. From the darkness, I heard the gruff voice simply say, "You're not Anthony." "Who, my neighbor?" After more silence, the voice responded, "This is 4059, right?" 4061, I corrected, holding my lamp tightly. The voice chuckled softly. "My bad, wrong place. I'll be on my way." And after a moment of silence, he said, "And hey, stay inside, alright? It's not safe out there."
I received an email this morning that immediately caught my eye. "Watch at your earliest convenience," it said. The email had a video attachment named after Owen, my son. I started the video, which showed two teenagers in a dimly lit classroom. Behind the teacher's desk was a taller boy obscured by darkness, and on the other side sat Owen. They were both in the uniform of the Catholic boarding school Owen had been sent to last year, a school I'd attended in my teenage years. I had fond memories of the place. The rules were strict, but there was a lot of trouble to get into if you had the right peers. The boy behind the desk began to speak. "Owen, consider this an interview. If I like what I hear, you will become the newest member of the Sinners Club, effective immediately." "Yes, President," Owen said, brushing sweat from his forehead. "What is your greatest sin?" the president said simply, almost innocently. Owen scratched his chin. "That's a tough one. Do you mean more violent or impactful?" The president laughed. "I'd love to hear both. Let's start with the violence." Owen sat up in his chair, excited. "When I was a kid, I found a puppy on my way home from school. Threw away the collar and tags and told my parents it was a stray. My dad said we had to get rid of it, so I did." "How?" The president leaned forward, and I could see a smile forming on his shadowy face. "Took it to a field by my house, stomped it until it stopped moving, didn't even bury it." Owen was grinning madly at the memory of it. The president leaned back, almost disappointed. "The impact story, then. One of my teachers in middle school was getting too comfortable a few years back. Started acting like he was my boss. I got rid of him, too." The president leaned forward again. "Okay. How?" Owen giggled to himself. "Bribed a girl from my class. Got her to accuse him of sleeping with her." The president grunted in approval. "And he lost his job?" "Worse," Owen said, eyes shining. "Fired, divorced, suicide, all in a calendar year." "Cliché, but effective," the president noted, crossing his arms. "So," Owen asked, "am I in?" "I'll be honest, Owen. You're entertaining, but your sins are childish. Your dark spirit is relatively youthful compared to ours, but perhaps it will mature, even curdle with time. Welcome to the Sinners Club." I paused the video as they shook hands. As I expected, Owen had the potential to succeed, but not the maturity to truly impress his new peers. Concerning, yes, but certainly not surprising. He was always more brutish than clever. When I was president at Owen's age, I wouldn't have accepted him. But perhaps this boy saw something in him. However, it was just as likely that he only got in based on legacy preference. If so, he won't last long. My daughter was the rebellious type, but never one to run away. Sure, she had her constant squabbles with her mother and I that all teens are prone to, but she had no money or car. I know she didn't just up and leave. I know this was something worse. Within days, search dogs led authorities to a deep wooded area where police found a ripped, bloody shirt. DNA testing showed it belonged to our daughter. My wife and I immediately told officers about the boyfriend. Our daughter was only 17, but she was hanging around a 20-year-old loser. Her grades had tanked, her relationship with the family dissolved, and her behavior became intolerable. He was a terrible influence. He was the root of all the family's problems. Surely he had something to do with this. A search warrant was executed and a bloody knife was discovered in his car. He was placed under arrest, and my wife and I finally thought we could get some sleep at night. That sense of calm was disrupted when we received a phone call in the middle of the night. Police had found my daughter. She was still alive. She had survived a slash to the neck and several self-defense stab wounds to the hands and arms. She had ripped up her shirt to bandage the wounds and stumbled through the wilderness before being discovered by a search party. She was taken to the hospital and we were told to drive over right away. My wife and I jumped out of bed and rushed to the hospital at record speed. When we arrived, the nurses left the room and gave us some alone time with our daughter. We walked towards her timidly and waited for her to speak. She looked at us with a smile and said, "You should have cut deeper. I can't wait until we're all back home." I had a pretty lonely childhood. No siblings, no mom. It was just me and my dad. But I always had the best birthdays. Every single birthday after my mom left was the best day ever. Why? One reason. Everyone celebrated it. Somehow, every person I crossed paths with knew my name and offered me presents. Whatever was nearby. Anything they could get their hands on. It was like everyone was a close personal friend as soon as I got near them. It was like a superpower. The best part was that no one remembered it. As soon as I walked far enough away, they always got confused looking and realized that whatever they'd given me, usually their phone or wallet, was suddenly missing. However, this year was different, and I think it's my fault. My birthday is September 6th. Last year, it was during my first week of college. After a day of everyone on campus treating me like a king, I got this ridiculous boost of confidence and completely reinvented myself. I made friends, finally got a girlfriend, and I was really, truly happy every day of the year. But I took it for granted. I let myself get greedy, which sounds ridiculous in hindsight. You'd think that a kid used to nothing would be a little more grateful, right? I had an affair over the summer. I didn't plan to, but it happened, and I kept it secret. Worse, the girl I'd been with thought I was single, so when I dumped her right before heading back to school, she was devastated. I was pointlessly cruel and selfish, and now I'm paying for it. How? One reason. When I woke up last Friday, everyone I crossed paths with hated my guts. At first, people just glared when I was walking by, but then it got worse. They called me names like cheater and scumbag while I walked to my first class. A couple people spat at me. I tried to stay in the back of the classroom, hoping that no one would be close enough to be affected by this curse. but everyone just looked at me. Then they just started throwing anything they could. I'm talking backpacks, textbooks, laptops, everything that wasn't nailed down. And they weren't gifts. Nowhere was safe. There were too many people everywhere. I walked off campus and just kept going. People rolled down their windows and threw things at me while I walked down the street. I tried getting on a bus and the driver just laughed, told me to fuck off and closed the door. After a few hours, I found an abandoned building and camped out inside for the rest of the day, knowing that it would be all over after midnight. But it isn't over. Every time I leave this place, people keep attacking me. I have to run away so they'll snap out of it. I've been stuck here for 3 days now. What the hell do I do?
A young boy from our town died recently, and I can't get it out of my mind. This isn't just a random face I glanced at the newspaper or saw on a local newscast. No, this is different. I've seen this boy before. He was in my sister's grade. He lived a few blocks away on the main street of the small town. I've definitely seen this boy before. I saw him occasionally while picking up my sister from school. I saw him at the local supermarket with his mom and at a skate park near my job. I saw him riding his bike tirelessly around our neighborhood for hours on end. I've seen this boy many times. I wish I would have saw him the night when I sped through the crosswalk. If I saw him then, maybe I could stop seeing him now. I used to hate being an only child, but then I met Jacob Spencer. The kid has 6 siblings, all much younger than him, who he had to take care of while his mother was working 3 jobs to keep them fed. He never had free time, never got a good night's rest, never seemed happy. That boy was just a ball of stress and fatigue every time I saw him at school. When I crossed paths with Jacob a few months back, he was walking home from the center of town. I was heading back to my place in the same direction, riding my bicycle down the street, when I saw him rubbing his temples and cursing to himself. I cruised up to him and eased on my brakes. "Hey Jake, long time no see. You alright?" "No, Kenny," he snapped. "I just got laid off, and no one in this town is hiring. I don't have a car, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "Hey, no worries, pal," I told him. "Listen, I had the same problem a while back, but I got a job a few miles out of town, at a gas station on the highway. I have to bike there, but it's not that bad." "I don't have a bike," Jacob said, dismissing my suggestion. "You can borrow my old one if you like," I offered. "The chain is a little loose, but the tires are fine." Jacob looked up at me, almost confused by my generosity. "You'd do that?" "Of course," I promised. "Here, my place is a couple minutes away. I'll let you ride it around, see if it works out for you." That afternoon, Jacob and I rode bikes all around town for a few hours. He was all smiles. After we returned to my place, Jacob took a moment to gather himself before telling me something that I'll never forget. "I've never felt more free, Kenny. Not once. Not ever. I have to pay you back for this." "No need, man," I said. "You keep that bike. Make some good use of it." And I shit you not, he cried right in front of me. He told me how much it meant to him, how he promised his mom that he'd keep the family together on her deathbed, how running into me felt like a blessing because now he had the means to keep the promise. We parted as friends, and I felt honored to have been a helping hand to someone in need. I heard about Jacob's death a few days later. Apparently, he was riding his new bike along the highway when he lost control of the bike while going downhill and weaved directly into a semi's path. Last I heard, the Spencer kids were all in foster care, and keeping them together wasn't a priority for the state. Spencer made a promise to keep his family together. In a misguided act of kindness, I accidentally broke that promise for him. If you've ever passed through Ashwood, Oregon, chances are you haven't noticed it. Maybe you stopped by and bought a snack at our general store, or used our restrooms before moving on to Salem or Eugene. Maybe you spent the night at a family's motel. You wouldn't remember it though. It's a highway town, a rest stop, nothing special. We notice you, but you don't notice us. Some days, everyone who passes by keeps going, and no one stops. It's so common that it's not even worth mentioning. Happens all the time. But when last Wednesday came, and no one even passed by, we sure as hell noticed. My father and a few others drove down the highway, checking to see if the road had been closed. Rumors swirled. Some thought that we had been caught between roadwork on both sides. Others assumed that we had been quarantined. None of our phones worked, and the radios were all static, so you could imagine that those were the more tame theories. When one of the patrollers got back that night, he said that he had gone as far as Millsburg. Between here and there, every other highway town seemed normal, but Millsburg was abandoned. Ran into someone who lives near Freeway Lakes on the way back, he told us. He'd gone all the way to Salem, not a soul in sight. My dad had gone south, planning to go as far as Eugene. He never came back. And just like that, 2 of Oregon's biggest cities were ghost towns. Over 300,000 people were unaccounted for, my dad included. One patroller said that the ranch he'd stopped by was completely abandoned, animals included. Other patrollers hadn't seen any wildlife along the roads either. Alien abduction or invasion became the prevailing theory. This weekend, a couple of patrollers didn't come back. No one's checking the roads anymore. Yesterday morning, we woke up to find the south side of town abandoned. No signs of struggle were found. They were just gone. My sister decided to take their chances and hit the road. They went north, leaving me behind when I admitted that I was too afraid of leaving. They didn't come back. This morning, I woke up to find everyone else gone. My neighbors, their pets, everyone. The sun's setting. Maybe it's setting on me tonight. Maybe everything. I've stopped looking out the windows. There's no one coming. But I stay behind my desk in the motel lobby in case someone does show up. And I ask myself why. Am I still a motel clerk if there's no one to check in? Am I a son anymore if my dad's gone for good? Am I still a brother if my sister never comes back? Who am I if I'm no one to anyone? And for how much longer? I'm an adrenaline junkie. I suppose that's a good way to start this. My thoughts are a bit jumbled, so you have to bear with me. Chasing the high is how I spent all of my time. I'd skip out on bills if it meant I could afford going to one of those few escape rooms in the country I hadn't been to yet. That was my biggest hobby for a time. Skydiving and other daredevil activities had stopped working a long time ago. They were always the same thing. If you've done it once, you've done it a million times. Escape rooms, though, they had new puzzles to figure out each time. I guess it was only a matter of time before I'd grow out of those as well. At the age of 23, I discovered urban exploration. In my mind, this was basically the same thing as escape rooms, except there aren't any actors. The dangers of being caught and fined only fueled the fire in me more. I made it my mission to find and document spirits. Of course, this was better in my head than it did in execution. Try I might, but I couldn't find anything worth sharing with the world. Name almost any haunted place in the United States. I've been there, found nothing, and went home with doubts. Sure, I had some stories. One time I fell into an open elevator shaft and caught a rusty wire to save myself. It sounds cooler on paper, I promise. Another time I heard footsteps and voices on the floor above me in an abandoned asylum. I ran up and was met with another group. Disappointment isn't a strong enough word. Until recently, the scariest encounter I had ever had was stumbling upon a deranged homeless man who chased me out of an old-fashioned farmhouse with a knife. That one revived my interest for a time, at least until I realized the odds of something like that happening again were slim to none. If you couldn't already tell, I had a bit of a problem. Some would call me insane. For this reason, I had no friends, and my family avoided me like the plague. That was okay. I understood. My lifestyle was a lot to keep up with, so I stayed busy either way. Well, I guess I did have one friend, even though I had never met him in person. We got to know each other through an urban exploration forum. If you thought I was obsessed, this guy brought it to a whole nother level. His name was Derek. After a few interactions, we gave each other our real-life phone numbers and kept each other updated on our findings. This guy had the lowdown on everything. He knew places Google didn't know about. I lost countless jobs due to my lifestyle. It was tough finding an employer who wouldn't get mad at me for leaving days at a time with no warning. How I made it work for as long as I did is just as much of a mystery as it probably is to you. Call it good luck in the getting hired department, or something. If I lost a job, I could find another one pretty quick. Of course, this meant I never worked anywhere for a long time. But hey, if I ever caught something worthwhile on camera, I could set myself up for a while. As you can assume, this started seeming more and more like a fairy tale day by day. My belief in the paranormal had dwindled to near absolute zero. I went a while wondering what was next for me. Doubt that I would find the next high was creeping more and more into my subconscious every day. I was now 25. I had spent 2 years wasting my life and had nothing to show for it, just a sketchy job history and an empty bank account. It's not like I could do much with all the footage either. What was I gonna do? Incriminate myself by publishing videos of me breaking into almost every place of interest in the United States? Surprisingly, I began to accept my fate. It was finally time to nut up and fix my life. For weeks, I had tried reconnecting with my family and got back to speaking terms with most of them. My old friends gave me the silent treatment, but honestly, I don't blame them. Life was going okay for a time. That was until I got a text from Derek. It read, "Hey Tom, I got intel on an abandoned asylum in Montana. I know those are your favorite. Going to check it out in a week. Supposed to be the real deal. Many missing person cases in the area. I'll send you coordinates, so if you don't hear from me, you know where to look. You know me though, I always carry." Attached was the image with coordinates. I'd be lying if I said his text didn't pique my interest, especially considering I lived in northern Idaho, and this place wasn't that far away. I traveled all across the country before. This would be nothing. But my life was starting to move forward. I couldn't let this stop that. Plus, I knew that Derek would update me if he found anything. Even if there wasn't, he'd text me something like, "It was a bust," or something along those lines. Fast forward 2 weeks. I'm ashamed to say that I spent every day for the last week waiting for an update. It was getting to me, so I text Derek. "Hey Derek, find anything in Montana?" It wasn't like him to not update me right away. As I said, he's really into this stuff, and it was like he couldn't wait to tell me everything once he returned home. I wouldn't have been surprised if I got a response within a few minutes. Fast forward another 2 weeks, and no response ever came. This left me in a moral dilemma. What if something happened to Derek? What if he needed my help? The adrenaline-fueled habits returned to my mind, and I'm sure you can guess what happened next. This story wouldn't exist if I didn't do exactly what you expect. I had no info on the asylum other than the location, but that would have to do. I began my drive around noon. I'll spare you the nonsense of my driving excursion, considering I was held up a number of times by different annoyances. I arrived at 10 p.m. It was completely dark, just the way I like it. Arriving, it was a one-way in, one-way out road that was roughly 5 miles, if I had to guess. The place was eerie, to say the least. This place was decrepit. The windows were still intact, surprisingly, and it was 6 stories. This asylum was massive. Pulling into the giant gravel parking lot, There were no other cars in sight. Okay, so maybe nothing happened to Derek. His car would still be here if he was, right? There's always an off chance that he could hide his car, but considering the desolation of the surroundings, there would be no point. I grabbed my camera and began to walk. Reaching the steps, I felt a chill. How I missed that feeling. It's always worth checking if the front door is accessible. A lock can be told whether or not the front doors are locked or unlocked. If they were unlocked, it could be a hotspot for locals. If not, it could be moderately patrolled. The giant double door swung wide open without a budge. I was instantly hit with the smell of rot. It wasn't just normal rot. Trust me. Over the past couple years, I've smelled it all. This was putrid, like iron mixed with literal shit. Naturally, it was dark, but my military-grade flashlight lit the place up like it was daylight. My handheld Canon also had night vision, so seeing was no issue. In the main room, there was a front desk and 3 hallways, one leading straight and one to either side of me. Odd. Usually, there would be stairs here. But judging by the outside of this building, it could be older than any other that I had explored yet. I couldn't wait to see what I would find. Figuring that the doors were placed in the dead center, I decided to flip a coin. Heads, I'd go right. Tails, I'd go left. I fished a quarter out of my pocket and flipped it. Missing the catch, the quarter bounced off the ground. The sound echoed down all 3 hallways. It seemed to never end. Once the sound reached what seemed to be forever away, the sound started to echo back towards me. I'm no expert, but this didn't seem right. I was then smacked square in the forehead by something. It stung like hell. I heard the quarter hit the ground again. What the hell? Did that quarter just come flying down the hallway and hit me? No way it could bounce with that velocity that I was hit with. Not that the former made sense either. Anybody with a logical brain would have left right then and there. But I was intrigued, not scared. Dreams of catching something and becoming famous began flooding my mind in the same way it used to. I shined a flashlight down on my feet to find the quarter. Yep, this place must be the real deal. The quarter was sitting on its side. I don't know the odds of that happening. I had never seen it before. I thought for a second, if it was to hit my forehead while facing forward, and going forward was never an option, something really wanted me to go away. If I was to catch this something on film, that would be the way to go. So forward I went. I walked about 100 yards when I came across the stairs leading up. The building was really bigger on the inside because there was still a lot of hallway to go. I ascended the stairs and reached the 2nd floor. Looking back, I don't know how I didn't find it odd that the building was 6 stories, but the stairs only went up 1 floor. I was met with another hallway. Doors to individual rooms were littered both ways. Wheelchairs and other expected debris were littered everywhere. I decided to head right, the same direction I was heading on the 1st floor. I was curious how long this hallway really went. I pivoted to the right, and this is where things got real. 10 feet in front of me was a girl in a gown, long black hair covering her face. Holy shit, I caught something. I checked the camera, and she showed up clear as day. Ma'am, do you need help? I asked. I was ecstatic. This was something no one has ever captured before. The clearest footage possible. This was bound to go viral. I took a couple steps forward towards her. Leave, she whispered. I couldn't think of much to say, but I managed a quick, why? Leave while you still have the chance. You don't have much time, she said. What do you mean? I asked. This was unreal. Not only did I capture a spirit on film, but I was having a conversation with it. Derek wasn't kidding, I mumbled under my breath. Derek didn't listen either, she instantly whispered. Wait, what does she mean? Derek didn't listen? This was everything I hoped for, but if the spirits here are this bold, why did Derek never say anything? I bet he's at home thinking about how to publish his own footage right now. That asshole. He was going to become famous first. I can't believe you didn't tell me about this. Money does strange things to people. In retrospect, the magnitude of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm speaking to a spirit, face to face, and she has told me to leave. Here I am, filming like an idiot. Maybe I should go. I checked the camera again to make sure I was still capturing this. I was. I have what I need. Maybe I should just go. I took a step back, and the woman let out a scream and ran into the room closest to her. Okay, yeah, I'm leaving. This is too much even for me. I turned around, and before I could even react, I was cold clocked across the head. I hit the ground, and the camera and flashlight flew off my head. I didn't try to retrieve them. I got back on my feet and took a few steps back. Standing in front of me was a man dressed as a surgeon. He was muscular. Too muscular. This guy made Arnold look small. The look in his eyes was crazed, to say the least. In his hand was a giant knife. I turned around and continued down the hallway as fast as I could. I could hear him running, trailing behind me, but he seemed to be slower than me. I ran for what seemed like ages, till I came to a cafeteria. It is what you would imagine it to be, large and open. I'd be trapped if I stayed, but I couldn't turn around now. The surgeon was still stomping his way down the hallway. The kitchen was my only option. I hopped through the serving window and was impressed by the size of the kitchen. I chose to hide inside one of the ovens. There were 5 ovens in total, and everything else was too wide open to risk. I climbed into the last one and held my breath the best I could. The surgeon entered maybe 30 seconds later. He was searching everything, pulling counters off the walls with brute strength and flipping them over. He got to the ovens and searched the first, then the second, third, fourth. He placed his hands on the door for mine, and that's when I heard a noise in the cafeteria. He must have heard it too because he let out a guttural scream and released the oven to find the source. I just might be saved. I waited about 5 minutes before I finally climbed out. I don't know what the sound that spared my life in that moment was, but I wasn't going to stand around to question it. I creeped back to the haunting hallway and walked as lightly as I could to find the stairs. I was going to get out of here, now. A long while in, I was met once again by this woman. "You need to hurry," she told me. "How much further do I have?" I questioned. "You're getting close to the stairs. Stay quiet, and once you reach the first floor, run. Each floor has an evil entity haunting it. This floor is the safest. The entity on the first floor is not as dumb as this one. Stay safe. There's hundreds of us trapped here. Now go." I wanted to ask her why she was helping me, but she was gone once again. I eventually saw something shining in the distance. It was my flashlight. I could start running, grab my flashlight, grab my camera that had to be near, and get out of here. I began my jog, but just as I did, I heard that scream again. The silhouette of the surgeon was on the other side of the flashlight. He was closer to it than I. But remembering how slow he was, I might be able to outrun him. I knew what was behind me, and I couldn't risk getting caught again with nowhere to hide. I sprinted faster than I ever have in my life. His pace quickened as well. For a time, it looked like I might beat him, but once I got closer, I realized the flashlight must have flown pretty far. He was gonna beat me. I'm screwed. I'd have to risk juking him. There was no other option. I'd never felt this kind of adrenaline before. We met at the stairs at the same time, and I went to dive down the steps, but it was useless. He caught me and slammed me to the ground. He was too powerful. He slammed a knife onto my chest, and I felt a cold liquid cover my torso. "Tom!" someone yelled. Next thing I knew, someone tackled the surgeon off of me. I scrambled to my feet and flew down the stairs, not questioning why they knew my name. I reached the first floor and began another mad dash to escape this hell. The floor was littered with blood. It was everywhere. I could hear hundreds of voices telling me to run. It was overbearing, but I did just that. I reached the door, went through them like they weren't even there, and flew down the steps. Then, I hit an invisible wall. Looking out into the parking lot, there were cars everywhere, mine included. I suppose I got everything I hoped for. It wasn't worth it though, because in the end, it cost me my life. It was supposed to be the perfect night. The kids were at the mother-in-law's. Wife had slid on some new lingerie, and all devices were shut off as we enjoyed a night of rekindled love. But my dream night quickly became a nightmare. I don't know where it came from, but it's getting closer. I was curled up in bed when I was first alerted to this intrusion of my home. It possessed such a strong odor that it could not sneak up on its victim, even if it had a desire to do so. But that just makes it more frightening. I know it's coming, and I'm still powerless against it. My wife had gone downstairs to grab us some water just prior to its arrival. I was paralyzed with fear at the thought of her alone in its presence, but just then, I could hear her screams from downstairs. "Baby, just stay put. It's in the hallway. I can make it outside. I can get help, just don't move." My mind was scrambling, and I began to sweat profusely as I gazed aimlessly beneath my bedroom door. As the seconds ticked by, it felt like an eternity. I began to see it reaching beneath the door crack, almost as if it was teasing me before the execution. As it slowly crept its way into my room, I began to fear my world grow smaller. I crawled further and further away from its advances until I pressed against the closet wall. I heard sirens and the unmistakable sounds of my wife's shaken screams from the front lawn. I was beginning to lose consciousness from the smoke inhalation when I heard her speaking to someone. "Ma'am, before I send my men in, is there anyone in the house?" "No, the kids were away, thank God. Just me at home tonight." My grandfather lived a quiet life after his wife passed away, choosing to spend his twilight years in solitude. He seemed to have no interest in being closer with his kids, or even getting to know any of his grandchildren. He rarely attended any family gatherings. I only met him once, during a wedding. Like me, he was quiet, a wallflower, in an otherwise loud family. I wonder if that's why he sent me the letter. He wanted me to help get his affairs in order. As unexpected as the request was, I'll admit I was curious. I took a few days off work and made the drive up to the lake house, a lonely place at the end of a long dirt road. The yard was an overgrown mess. The home, surely once beautiful sight, was left in disrepair. As I approached the front door, I saw two worrying details. First, a note had been hammered into the door, and second, the door was ajar. The note was in my grandfather's writing. "Don't be alarmed by what you find inside. There are two messes for you to clean up. The first is here, the entryway. The second is in the basement. The basement needs to be completely cleared out, the contents destroyed, and the room cleaned. When it's done, the house and everything inside will belong to you." Driven again by curiosity, I pushed the door open. The large entryway was dark, but I could see the swinging feature amongst the shadows. I couldn't will myself to look up, so instead, I looked forward. I didn't know what kind of game my grandfather had been playing, but I knew I wanted it to end soon. I found the door to the basement, also left open, at the far end of the room. I turned my phone light on, and, more cautiously this time, walked down the stairs. The basement was small and notably well kept. On the wall to my right was a variety of tools hung from a wooden pegboard. To the left, power tools were neatly organized on a large table. On the far side of the room, hand and leg cuffs were chained to the wall. Above them, hanging from the ceiling, were hundreds of locks of human hair, loosely organized by color. Handfuls of it were stapled to the ceiling, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell how many people they came from. Disgusted, I made my way back up the stairs. I decided that I would call the police and show them what I found, and after that, I would want no part of my grandfather's game. Some other poor soul would have to clean up his mess. When I looked up at him on my way to the front door, I pointed my phone light up so I could get a closer look at the monster who brought me here. The man hanging from the ceiling wasn't my grandfather. The wildfires got really close that summer. The sky was a gray-orange mass of clouds, dusting everything beneath them with ash. We all stayed inside. It was too hard to breathe, too hard to see. The kids, of course, didn't let that stop them. My son Roger seemed more excited than ever to go out and explore. The wife didn't like it, so I told him to cover his mouth while outside and not to get lost in the mess. A mess, that's the way to describe it. Roger phrased it best when he got back one afternoon and said, "Dad, it's like the end of the world out there." And for someone, it was. In that first week, a boy in town had gone missing, Alan Gibney. He was one of Sue Gibney's kids. A larger boy who made it a habit picking on girls at school. One of my daughters, Megan, was one of the girls he bullied. He liked to pull her hair. The boy's behavior aside, I felt bad for Sue. After that, my kids weren't allowed out. The fires got worse. Evacuation was less of a what if, more of a when. It never happened, of course, but it had us distracted. One afternoon, a few days before the sky began to clear up, Roger had a friend over. I usually let the boys keep to themselves, but I wanted to give them good news. The fire was dying down. Before I could push the door open, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. It was the other boy, Max. He sounded upset. "If your parents find out, we're dead." "Worse than dead," Roger said. "We get locked up, basically forever." I stopped breathing. My heart was pounding in my ears. I peeked through the slightly open door, not daring to make a sound. It looked like Max was crying. "I know what you're gonna say," Max said. "I know what he did was wrong, but he got what he deserved," Roger interrupted. "You know what he did. You saw the bruises he left on Meg." The idea that someone hurt my daughter made my blood boil, but something told me to keep listening. "Dude," Roger said, "he was bad, and we both know that he would have gotten worse. I thought you understood that. You even took pictures." "I took them for her." "I know, Max, I know." I couldn't bear to confront them. That would be admitting what I heard was real. While she indulged her sister's desire for a tea party, I went through Meg's room and found my old digital camera between her mattress and box spring. I scrolled through her photos and saw what they had done in reverse order. The first image was Alan's lifeless body. Roger and his friend were standing over him. The second, Alan standing alone, terrified, knowing what was about to happen.
Sam was my boyfriend. I love Sam very much. There was a time when we were going to get married, but that seems like a different life now. Since I had last seen Sam, the flower has appeared next to my bed almost every night. It comforts me. The stem pushes out through the pile of the bedroom carpet. It grows thick and long. I watch as it rises up high and sways with a slow, dull vegetable weight. Then the receptacle bulges into prominence at the top of the stem, and an ovary of 4 petals extends out from the center and tickle the air. I laugh. I cover my mouth, and I laugh like a little girl. I'm 75. No one who ever sees me on the street. None of the other attendants in the apartment block. No one at all knows that I had a life once upon a time. That I had a boyfriend who I loved, who loved me back. That we were going to get married one day. But the flower knows. The flower sways backwards and forwards. It reeks like death, but I enjoy the stink. I cover my mouth, and I laugh. Some nights, I twist the old back over the edge of the bed, and I hang my head upside down until my white hair touches the floor. From this angle, the flower looks different. I laugh. I keep on laughing. I remember the last time I saw Sam. It comforts me. Upside down, the petals are arms and legs. The ovary is a torso, and the swollen receptacle is a head. Sam's white, swollen head. And the stem, swaying backwards and forwards, is the rope Sam tied around his neck in the July of 1965. The flower never rots. And because the flower never rots, Sam will never rot. He appears to me now exactly as I saw him that last time. My nails drawing blood as I tried with all of my strength to force my fingers between his ruptured skin and the unforgiving tightness of the noose. I close my eyes now and listen to the flower swaying and smell its fresh, dead smell wafting through the air. I laugh. I put my fingers inside of my mouth, and I laugh.
Is this your card? The magician said, holding the volunteer's signed Ace of Hearts. Yes, the man yelled in surprise. Of course it is, the magician joked. And in your shock, you might be wondering how the card was removed from your shirt pocket. Would you do me a favor and see what has taken its place? Sure. The man unbuttoned his pocket and pulled out cash. It's a $100 bill. Yes, sir. And now it's yours. Thanks for being such a fantastic assistant. With that, the magician gestured back to the man's seat. The crowd clapped, the man gleefully holding his reward in the air for his friends to see. The magician allowed the applause to die out before continuing. He smiled mischievously. With that being said, I asked for one more volunteer. Hands shot up in the air immediately, including mine. Don't expect to get picked, Byron grumbled. The other guy's probably just a plant. I glared at him briefly, annoyed, before looking back. The magician was no longer smiling, instead staring daggers at my friend. Somehow, from the front of the room, he seemed to have heard what Byron said. Sir, he called out to Byron. I believe you would be a perfect assistant. Please come to the stage. The audience began to clap, and after rolling his eyes at me, Byron relented. As my friend reached the stage, the smile slowly returned to the magician's face. Well then, let us speak about your skepticism. This man, as you may have overheard, does not believe in magic. The magician placed his hand on Byron's shoulder, and the crowd began to boo. I joined in. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to have doubts about my abilities. Most magicians are simply flamboyant con men using sleight of hand and rigged variables to present something that mystifies believers and challenges non-believers' abilities to see past the ruse. I, however, am no con man. The magician took his large hat and held it towards the audience, spinning it around. As you can see, this is a normal hat. No rigged variables, of course, and certainly no rabbit. Sir, what is your name? Byron. Take this hat from me, Byron. Look at it closely and make sure it's completely normal. No gears, no wires, nothing out of the ordinary. Byron looked over the hat, turning it in his hands. Seems normal to me. Hold out the hat, sir, with the opening pointed towards me. Byron did as instructed. My previous trick was switching the card with a $100 bill from across the stage, the magician said, holding up the signed playing card. And for my next trick, I will exchange this card for something almost as valuable as money. The magician reached into his hat with the other hand holding the card. As he pulled his hand out, Byron collapsed. The magician held up his hand. The card had been replaced by Byron's still beating heart. Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is a little bit different than the other short scary stories that I tell. One is that there's only 4 stories, because those are the only ones that responded to me. The second and main one is, it's on one topic, serial killers. Let me know if you enjoy the topic versions of the series, and if you do, which topics you would like me to search for, or if you just like them random. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, as I'm trying to be a little bit more consistent on the second channel, and sit back, relax, and enjoy. Old Jebediah Worthy fell down the stairs in his house last night. An unfortunate accident, they said. Last Thursday, Myra Fisher's house burned down with her in it. We all knew that cigarettes would be the death of her, but figured cancer would deliver the punch, not an inferno. The Monday before that, Giles Northcutt got locked in the freezer in his butcher shop. A tragic shame with a faulty lock mechanism. And on the first of the month, Lucy Nagel had one too many of her county famous snickerdoodles, and her poor little heart couldn't take it anymore. 4 suspicious deaths in less than a month, and yet the police see and do nothing. How can they be so fucking blind? I've tried telling people, anyone I can find. Someone is hurting the sinners in this town. The drunks, the gypsies, the rapists, and thieves. But they all just laugh at me. The only thing Worthy is guilty of is having sermons run too long. If baking cookies is a crime, then sure, lock Lucy up for life. Yeah, $7.50 for a pound of ground beef is kind of extortionate, but it's Giles. Only person Myra Fisher ever hurt was herself. But they were wrong. I know they were wrong. Jebediah Worthy is a deviant who told any young girl he could find that sleeping with him would absolve them of their sins. Myra Fisher was an alcoholic junkie who would lie, steal, and beg for her next fix. Giles Northcutt used his prices to fund his gambling addiction, and Lucy Nagel watched her mother die a slow and painful death so that recipe could be hers. She didn't even throw away the rat poison. It's stuff like this that makes me so disappointed when I see my best friend Keith drive drunk, so I decided to be a good friend to him. I'll buy all the rounds for him, and hell, I'll even offer to be his designated driver. I'll drop him off at the outside of his house. I live just down the block, so no one will see me walk from his house to mine. I position him in the front seat and turn on the carbon monoxide. It finally occurs to him what's happening, but the muscle relaxer slipped into his 3rd brandy of the night leaves him powerless. Just before I close the door, I lean in real close and whisper to him, "I warned you." It took me 10 years to make detective, which was about 7 years longer than it should have. After that, it only took me another 2 for them to put me on homicide. I was the first woman ever in the division. Once I got there, even the assholes in charge couldn't argue with my success rate, so pretty soon thereafter, I became their go-to guy. The stranger the case, the more likely it would wind up on my desk. We had a series of 6 murders over the last 3 months that were so close in method that they had to be related. A bona fide serial killer was on the loose in our precinct. The killer's MO was clinical, and the way he carried the killings out was chilling. He'd break into a house, probably one that he cased to make sure it was safe, and the victim would be alone. He would kill the victim with a single small caliber shot to the forehead. Then, he'd pose the victims in a respectful way and take photographs. Other than the hole in the foreheads, you wouldn't have known anything was wrong with them. The way we knew he took photographs, and the chilling part, was because he mailed them to the station in lavender envelopes, and he'd used the victim's address as the return address. No name, just the address, and always 5 pictures. The street, the front door, and 3 of the victim. Taunting? Maybe, but I think he was just sick. Our break? The asshole licked a stamp. He had been in the army a few years back, so we made a DNA match and brought him in without incident. We executed a search warrant of his house as well, and apparently we found some fairly incriminating evidence. I sat down to interview him, as much out of curiosity as anything. We already had him cold. Why? I haven't done anything. Right. I'd asked for a lawyer, but I haven't done anything. Sure, I understand. You look familiar. I figured you'd probably see my picture in the paper at some point. Do you have relatives in town? Before I could answer, another detective came in and threw one of the lavender envelopes on the table. Looks like we might have another one, the detective said. We found this at his house. Must have got him right before you could mail it. I looked at the envelope. There was something familiar about the return address. I couldn't quite... All at once, my blood ran cold. My hands shook as I tore the envelope open and pulled out the photograph. There it was, a street I knew so well. No, God, please. I barely had the coordination in my fingers to move the first picture out of the way, but once I finally managed it, I saw my daughter's front door, painted that unmistakable shade of blue, in photograph number 2. You're a murderer, the scrawny-looking man said. I know you did it. I scowled. I was just about to sleep when my neighbor decided to start spouting his usual bullshit. Look, man, can we skip this crap? I have no idea what you're talking about, and I was just sleeping. A lie, but I wanted this idiot to be gone. I closed the door, but the neighbor blocked it with his foot. You murderous freak, he spat. I can smell the blood on your hands. I blinked. Are you stupid? I told you 1,000,000,000 times. I'm not a serial killer. He did not believe me. He never did. Look, I'm going to sleep. I pushed my neighbor away and shut the door closed. I groaned and went back to my bed. Fucking neighbor. I fell asleep half an hour later, only to wake up with someone banging on my door. I opened my eyes and found my walls painted red. The police charged into my house and found me in the middle of a pile of cut limbs. Blood was sprayed on all my walls. I was shell-shocked when the police arrested me. An anonymous call was made that night. Someone had seen me dragging suspicious bags into my house that were the size of a person. The police decided to check it and found me in my bedroom surrounded by body parts and blood all over me. I tried to explain that I was innocent, but when they found the bone saw with my DNA on it hidden underneath the floor, the jury made their decision. As I was drafted to prison, I saw my neighbor in the crowd that had gathered outside Blackside City's court hall. As I passed him, he whispered, "Rot in jail, you psycho." He had this insane look in his eyes, and as I was dragged away from him, I screamed, all while staring at the red stains on his nails. This letter is from a confessed serial killer to his 13-year-old daughter. Dear Samantha, I'm sorry I haven't been around for a while, but you're gonna have to be strong, just like I'm trying to be strong for you. I don't know how much your mother has told you, but sooner or later you're gonna hear about what Daddy did, and I want to tell you why I did it. They're gonna tell you I killed those 7 kids, that I tortured them first, chaining them in that shed in the woods. You remember the place. You used to build a fort there and play princess of the castle. You'll always be my princess, even after everything that has happened there. You're gonna hear about how the victims were starved and forced to eat the one that came before them, and how that they were chained up until the next one came around to eat them up too. You're gonna see my name brought up on websites and social media. Photos of the murders are gonna be uploaded, and you're gonna have to see those corpses stripped of flesh and put on display for the whole world to see. You're gonna hear priests condemning me to hell, and the news stations using my name as propaganda for whatever self-serving platform they can find. And worst of all, you're gonna be feared because your association with me. But you have your whole life ahead of you, and no matter how bad it seems now, this is not your defining moment. The weeks or months until everyone forgets won't last forever. These killings will not determine who you are. I won't be coming home again, but someday after years have stretched this memory thin, it's gonna be like none of this has ever happened. That's why I did it. That's why I confessed, so you could move on and forget. That's why I never told the police that you were the one that led them into the woods. That's why I turned myself in as soon as I found the bodies. I don't care how many of them you got. There's only one person I care about protecting, and that's my princess. If this is what you want, then you should have it. You deserve everything in this world. I know that you told me that you weren't going to stop leading people into the woods, but at least try to be more careful next time. Don't take kids. Don't take anyone they're going to look for. And when I'm gone, I hope you find someone who loves you as much as Daddy does. I hope they love you so much they confess for you and you can keep playing forever. Don't ever stop playing, Princess. The world is yours. Love, Daddy. This letter was confiscated after an inmate tried to smuggle it out of the visitation room. One day, my fiancée said something was bothering her. My fingers are too long and slender. They made her feel like the Grim Reaper touches her at night. So I took a knife and chopped them one by one to be half as long. The bone showed a lot of resistance, but I got through it after a few strong chops. My love sat with me the whole time, sharing my pain and telling me how much she appreciates what I do for her. And we were happy. As I pet her with my stumps, she looks at me and says that my eyes are asymmetrical and it bothers her because it makes me look judgmental. So I took out a spoon and dug out my smaller eye, leaving a dangling eyeball. Then I cut it with scissors. That was the most painful part, but I don't want my love to feel judged. My fiancé cleaned up the mess and afterwards came to hug me and comfort me, and we were happy. A few days later, she said that my accent bothers her. It's too foreigner for her taste. So I took out the scissors again, and I cut it, so my speech wouldn't bother her ever again. It took me 2 tries to cut it completely, but it was worth the pain, and we were happy. I came home from work. Everyone is worried, but they just don't understand. I found a letter on our door. I'm confused. You're not the man you used to be. I'm not sure I love the new you. I don't know if I'll come back. Wherever she is, she must be happy. I'm trembling with excitement, waiting for Thomas to come home from his business trip. It's taken me days to prepare, but I know he'll love the surprise. There's wine chilling on the counter. I changed the sheets on the bed. They were so dirty. I brought a special red silk teddy, a cheap internet sale one that barely covers my skin. My skin, it doesn't look as good as I want it to lately. It's gotten saggier and a little dull, but I know Thomas will make me feel sexy. He's kissed it and touched it enough times. One of my favorite things is watching him kiss the little butterfly tattoo on my hip. Adrenaline surges through me when I hear the key in the lock. Lee, honey, oh wow. His words trail off when I assume he sees the wine and the candles. His tone shifting, his footsteps coming closer to the bedroom. God, I've missed you. The door's open and we finally make eye contact. I flutter my eyelashes, waiting for my man to join me. He doesn't though. He lets out an ear-splitting scream, and he doesn't stop. The noise makes me frightened. I thought he would like this. Does he think I'm ugly? Does he like the way I got ready for Valentine's Day? He's still screaming. Something about where is Lee, and what did I do to her? I try to explain. I'm telling him I am Lee. I even have the butterfly tattoo, see? But you know what this asshole does? He calls me a crazy bitch, asks where his wife is, and says he's calling the police. I get off the bed and grab my hunting knife. I'm pissed. He never fucking appreciates anything I do. Fucking men, they're all the same. If you must know, the rotting sack of meat the skin comes from is downstairs. I'm a nice guy. I take care of her when she's had one too many drinks. I'm a nice guy. I love her unconditionally, even if she doesn't love me. I'm a nice guy. She said she wanted to be more independent, so I cut the brakes on her parents' car. I'm a nice guy. I let her cry on my shoulder during the funeral. I'm a nice guy. There's a lot of guys out there that only want to get in her pants. So at parties, I give those guys just a bit too much heroin. I'm a nice guy. I tracked down her ex who cheated on her. I fed his genitals to pigs at a local farm. The rest of him I tossed in a meat grinder at the slaughterhouse. I'm a nice guy. I know her so well. All her favorite music, interests, hobbies, and cute things she said 4 years ago. Facebook is useful. I'm a nice guy. I stay perched every night on her fire escape so I can watch over her while she sleeps. I'm a nice guy. I set her apartment on fire while she was showering so I could save her while I was just in the neighborhood. I'm a nice guy. I let her stay at my place. I have her complete trust. I'm a nice guy. I chained her inside my closet while she was sleeping. There's no place safer for her in this world. I'm a nice guy. I love her, even when she calls me a crazy monster. I'm a nice guy. You believe me, right? The sun is up and peeking through the trees in my garden as I sit and sip my coffee, enjoying the calm and stillness of the early morning. This has always been my favorite part of the day, and I stretch contentedly. The pleasant arch of my body reminded me of the delights of last night. I wonder if he's awake yet. I can see him in my mind's eye, his beautiful body naked on the rumpled sheets, his hair sticking up everywhere, and his face with that cute little furrow between his eyebrows that only appears when he's dreaming, or worried, or in pain. Whenever I see it, I want to kiss the furrow and make it all better. It's been a long, hard road to where we are today. Both of us made mistakes along the way, and there's been a time when I thought I'd scared him off and ruined things, but now, on this glorious morning, I sit and give thanks that he's finally mine forever. There's no way I'm ever gonna let him go. I love him too much to ever risk losing him. I finished my coffee and put a fresh pot on. The radio is playing love songs all day today. Normally, I'd be feeling bitter and angry, but this morning, every lyric seems to be written for me and my beautiful boy, so I happily sing along as I prepare my tray. It's ready, and it's perfect. Carefully, I carry it upstairs and nudge the bedroom door open with my foot. "Good morning, lover," I say as I see him start to stir. "Did you sleep well?" He opens his eyes and looks at me, his eyes still half filled with dreams. Suddenly, realization draws and he jolts awake and tries to sit up, only to be stopped by the handcuffs on each wrist and the shackles on his ankles. He tries to shout out, but his voice is all but silenced by the duct tape wound around his face. I laugh. "Silly, did you forget where you were? I thought I made it clear last night that you're not going anywhere." I set the tray down on the bed and watch his beautiful blue eyes darken in fear as he sees the boiling water, hacksaw, bleach, razor blades, and other instruments of torture I have set out beautifully on a white muslin cloth, along with a single red rose for my forever love. An elderly couple lay in the hospital together. They have no children. Creeping up the wrinkled man's neck, along the folds of excess skin, is a faded tattoo of a snake emerging from a skull. On the woman's sagging lower back, the distorted image of a goat skull is pressed against the sterile sheets. They were once wild and passionate lovers. He was in a rock band. She was into coke. He liked to set fires. She manipulated others using sex. He once robbed an old woman. She tried to hit stray cats with her car. Two heinous people in a relationship that rivaled Shakespearean love. They were perfect. Though they were never married, they were inseparable. How could you be angry at someone who hated the same things that you hated? Through the life they built together, the couple was enamored. There could never be a love so fervent, so limitless, so unapologetically fanatical. And their eyes closed at the same time, for the final time. He dreamed of her youthful, leather-clad body. She dreamed of his very loud music. With a final sigh, each dreamed of the other and died in peace. Each had been quite accepting of the fact that if hell existed, they would burn there internally. It was a price for the life that they loved to live. However, they came to learn something about hell. It was different for lovers. They were chained very near to each other, just out of reach. Every day, one of them would be set on fire. The other was given access to a fountain and a thimble. When I first met Anna, I remember her telling me that her and her family had a saying, "You can never have too much meat." Her family is strange. For example, once a month, they wouldn't answer any calls, texts, or even knocks at the door. In fact, they'd be completely absent from their homes on that random date. They also kept cattle, which was weird as I never saw them use said cows for literally anything. So I just always thought it was just a weird thing they said, as some kind of inside joke that I was not privy to. Fast forward a few years, and not only are we married, but we're happily expecting our first. But at this point, I knew why their family had their monthly day of absence. Of course, as pregnant women do, she started having her cravings, which were only made worse by her continuing to have a time of the month, which all leads to now. I was driving home from a food run. It was around 10:30 p.m. In the bed of my F-150 was dinner. Now, I spent about 2 hours procuring it, but I didn't mind. My main priority was to make sure that her and our little one were fed, and I would do anything to help them. Tonight also happened to be one of those nights on top of it all. As I parked in my driveway, I look at the concrete shed. Looks like everything's in order, I thought to myself. I reached into the bed of my truck and pulled out a freshly killed buck. He was a big son of a bitch, so it took some serious effort on my part. So much so that she heard me from all the way in the shed, a miniature bomb shelter. I already had the parts we'd use later in a mini cooler, so she could just go to town on this thing. As I opened the door and turned on the light, she's startled by my presence, growling at me. However, she quickly realized that it's just her beloved husband, and just starts loving on me in all that sort of puppy way. Even as a werewolf, she was so sweet and gentle. I placed a deer right next to her, wished her a good dinner, gave her a goodnight kiss, and went to bed. I don't care what anyone else says. I know that Anna's unusual, but that doesn't make her less amazing to me, and there's no one I would rather start a family with. I love her, no matter what. What is love? People will tell you different things. For instance, a poet may weave a tale of wonder with beautiful words that quicken the heart and put butterflies in the stomach. A scientist, on the other hand, might tell you that love is simply a chemical reaction in our bodies, pheromones reacting to the most basic levels to further genetic lines. And an old couple with wrinkles around their eyes may smile at each other knowingly and state that love is a bond forged over time, becoming stronger with each overcome hurdle. Linguists who have the knack for acronyms may joke that love is abbreviated for loss of voluntary emotions. They might be right after all. But me, I know what love really is. It's that little voice in your head that starts out small, but grows over time, singing to you, moving you, swaying you, shouting at you. Love is that angry voice that shatters your peace and tears your mind apart, little by little, when she won't respond to your texts or phone calls or emails, and when you're standing on her porch beating down the door to be let in. Love won't let you breathe. It strangles your throat like a too tight collar that you can't loosen. Love is the blurred highway you drive down after you had too much to drink. Love is the blood on your knuckles after breaking open her bathroom window. Love is hearing her wash at the sink while you're standing behind the shower curtains. Love is wondering where the hammer in your hand came from as you smash into her skull over and over. Love is staring into her blank eyes, the red puddle growing around her cracked head. Her plump lips parted, just so in an expression of surprise and fear. No more. It was that moment, as I slowly slumped on the floor, that I realized that love is the relief of knowing it's finally over. I hummed to myself as I made dinner, danced around the kitchen to some 30s jazz song about falling in love, and managed not to spill the pesto sauce everywhere, while I rolled it up into little pasta bundles to place between the layers of the tender meat. If there was anything I wanted to do today, it was to cater to my husband. He had given me a lot of support over the years, taught me patience, and helped me see my worth. It was more than I think I could ever say I did for him. I placed the plates on a beautiful silver platter his sister had gifted us last Christmas and began the journey upstairs to give him dinner in bed. Once I pushed the door open, I paused, horrified at the sight of my husband flailing about our bed. The sheets around him were crimson, stained, as if in a theme of Valentine's, by the blood that flowed freely from his wrists. I almost tossed the platter down and ran to him. "Now, dear," I whispered as I applied force to his forearm, keeping it in place to string it back up properly to the bedpost. "You can't keep hurting yourself like this." He recoiled in response to my touch, his eyes begging me to let him go. "Baby, please," he whimpered. "Please, I love you. Please don't do this to me. To us." He was choking back his sobs. I bit back a smile. What a sweet sight. Today felt like we had taken a huge step in our relationship. I stroked his hair and sat him up carefully. Okay, love. I'll do just that. Everything is gonna be fine, but you need to eat for me, alright?" I went about picking the platter back up from where I left it. I spooned a little pasta bundle sandwich between two thin slices of beef and gently placed it in his mouth. "Good, huh?" He pressed his eyes closed and nodded through mouthfuls, so I gave him a second helping, and then a third, and finally took a bite of my hard work for myself. I frowned, disappointed. "I thought you said she tasted better than I did," I mumbled to myself as I pulled up the nude photographs his coworker had sent him earlier on in the week, along with the incriminating messages. "To be honest, dear," he froze, shock and disgust painting themselves across his features. I leaned in to lick the stream of pesto that trailed off the corner of his lip. "I think I might have burnt her this time. What a shame." His face was contorted in pain, and tears began to make their way down the slopes of his cheeks. "Oh, no, don't worry, baby." I wiped them away with my thumb. "There's plenty left for me to try again tomorrow."
"Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Elliot gave the beautiful brunette sitting at the bar a smile and tilted his head. Then she threw her martini all over him. "Creep," she grumbled, and then stood up and stomped away. Such is my life, Elliot thought as he grabbed a napkin to wipe off his face. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a petite blonde approaching him. "Wow, people have no manners these days," she said, and took a seat in the empty chair next to him. "Women like her make it harder on the rest of us to meet somebody." Elliot smiled. Maybe this won't be such a bad night after all. He introduced himself, and she told him her name was Andrea. After a few minutes of conversation, she agreed to let him buy her a drink. Andrea ordered a margarita, and Elliot stuck to his usual Miller Genuine Draft. They talked for hours, ordering several more drinks along the way. Finally, it was apparent this was going to go farther than just friendly conversation and flirting, so they headed to the men's room. Elliot wasted no time and gripped her in his arms. His kiss was slow and gentle as he caressed her, so passionate that she was unaware of anything else as the room spun around her. Then she passed out. He scooped her up and carried her out of the bar. As he walked past the bartender, Elliot gave him a gracious nod. "I guess she's a bit of a lightweight," he said, then walked out. It didn't take long to hail a cab. Elliot checked his watch for the time, and once they were in the cab, he grabbed her purse to look for her ID. He had to move quickly. The cab pulled over on the side street and stopped in front of a black, unmarked van. Elliot got out and paid the driver, then scooped Andrea up in his arms, careful not to jostle her up too much as he loaded her into the back of the van. He would get rid of her purse later. "This one's cute," said a man named Maurice. "She'll go for a high price overseas." "Yeah, she certainly is that." Maurice reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope filled with large bills. "You can count if you want, but it's 20%, just like we agreed." "No need, I trust you," Elliot said, and pocketed the money. The walk back to his apartment was short, and he quickened his pace as the cool February air hit him. He wasn't surprised when he found the brunette woman from the bar earlier that night sitting on the front step of the building waiting for him. "Same time tomorrow night?" Elliot smiled, nodded, and handed her $500 out of the cash he had. "There's an extra 100 in here due to the holiday. Thanks again, and happy Valentine's Day."
Grandma, tell me about how you and Grandpa met and fell in love, please.
Irani's daughter, Ariana, crouched on the floor, giggling. "All right, let's see. I hardly remember."
Grandma, you remember how handsome Grandpa was that night at the Valentine's dance?
"Oh, yes," Aragni continued, smiling. "I was watching the dance from a quiet corner, and as soon as I saw him, I wanted him for my own. I shook my hair out, got myself looking presentable, and approached your grandpa. He was enchanted right away. He asked me to marry him that same night, so we married. Your mother was born next year, and then, well..."
Go on, Grandma. This is the best part.
"Oh, goodness, so bloodthirsty. I ate him, of course. We can't keep our human form forever, you know."
But you loved him, right?
Ariana worried. "Of course, dear. I ate his head first. He never knew what hit him. Then I sucked out his blood."
Gracious, it's late. Time to practice. Show me first, Grandma.
Ariana begged.
Like you did that night.
Granny shook, and her bristly hair reshaped into a lovely oval. Honey blonde locks sprouted to replenish bristles. 8 orbs clumped together into 2 sparkly aquamarine eyes, and luscious red lips plumped out from where sharp mandibles had been. Another shake, and her bloated body became willow slender, while 8 legs became 4 shapely human limbs. "Now you try." Ariana shook vigorously. Blonde curls sprouted riotously from her head, but her body remained spider-like. Aragni chuckled. "You need to keep practicing, little one. You'll never catch a man like that. Now, to bed."
Millie, wake up. Come on, it's your birthday. Today's a very special day. Mom's working so you can spend the whole day with me. Meet me in the living room when you're ready. My sister Elena sings cheerfully at me after shaking my mattress. I get out of bed and stare at the mirror with a disheartening annoyance. My mousy brown hair lays as limp as death, and my eyes are so unremarkable that barely anyone knows what color they are. My spindly frame, flat all over like a boy, leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not the prettiest of girls where I come from, and definitely not as beautiful as Elena. She's 25 and has been perfect since well before I was born. I trudge down the hall and pour myself some cereal into a bowl. Elena's perched on a chair, eyes brimming with excitement. She starts in before I even sit down. "Okay, Millie, hear me out. The women in our family have always been a little different. Every Valentine's Day on our 18th birthdays, something called the blooming takes place. It sounds weird, just listen. You were born on February 13th, so there's not much time to teach you everything. Go out tomorrow and find the right man. If you feel one, drawing your spirit near, that's the one you want." "What?" She continues despite my incredulous expression. "Meet him for a date and let him take you home. Make sure he lives alone. There are several ways to find out without being obvious. Let nature take its course and call me the next day. Tell me everything." By this point, she had her hands on my shoulders and was looking into my eyes, so I listened. A tall and handsome man catches my eye the next night. I pretend it's still my birthday. I'm amazed how easy this is. He seems captivated by everything I say. He lives alone and takes me home. Nature takes its course. I wake up the next day sore but happy. He's still laying there peacefully. I snuggle him. He feels like cold marble against my skin. Eyes open, no pulse, like a withered grape left in the hot sun. I called Elena, panicked, and gave her the address. When I opened his door, she's smiling wide, completely calm. Tears are streaming down my face. Elena, help me. What did I do wrong? I did exactly what you told me to do. She gathers me into a hug. You did what you're supposed to do. I look at her, more confused. Millie, go look in the mirror. I go into the bathroom and look at myself. My eyes are blue like the Caribbean water. My hair a flowing mane of chestnut curls. My body curvaceous and beautiful. I understand now. I understand everything. And this is going to be so much fun. Beneath the decorations of pink, red, and white, girls danced with their sweethearts. My sights, however, were set upon she who sat alone at one of the tables, her chocolate brown eyes scanning the crowd. Beneath her thumb and index finger, she twirled a pink rose. Her name was Vanessa, and she was, without a doubt, the prettiest girl in the school. Not just because of her looks, but also because of her sweet, innocent disposition. From the moment I first saw her, I was love-struck, though I could never muster up enough courage to tell her how I felt. At least today, I could leave her a Valentine's Day gift. Did your date stand you up? I asked, approaching her. I guess, she sighed. I don't even know who it is, only that they left a rose in my locker. It has this card tied to it that says, "To the prettiest girl in school." Oh, sounds like you got a secret admirer, I teased, nudging her shoulder. She smiled timidly, her cheeks turning red. Punch? I offered, holding out one of the 2 cups. Thank you, she said, taking it. We continued conversing, all the while watching the others dance to the music that played. After about 15 minutes, Vanessa began to grow disoriented. Hey, are you alright? I asked, as she slouched over, head in her hands. I'm not sure, she groaned. I feel lightheaded all of a sudden. Here, I said, helping her up. Let's get you outside for some fresh air. Outside the gymnasium, I knelt by Vanessa as she tried to regain her composure. I think I need to go home now, she managed to say. I'll call my parents. I can't drive like this. Well, how about I bring you home? I suggested. Are you sure? She asked. I don't want to be a burden. I have nothing better to do, I answered, shrugging. Well, okay, she mumbled. As I guided her to my car and buckled her into the passenger seat. As I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, my heart was pounding with excitement. I was looking forward to bringing the prettiest girl in school home. With me, anyway. Thanks again for helping me, she slurred, before her eyes fluttered closed. Anything for my favorite student, I replied. Halloween ain't scary. I've known that ever since I've been old enough to know what it was. I know it as I arrived to school in the old white sheet with 2 holes cut out. It's my costume, and it will do. As I close my locker, I'm greeted with a boo from some dumb kid wearing a scream mask. He must think he's pretty clever. I shrug at him and start in the other direction. I know it as my teacher lines us up for the annual 8th grade haunted house. I walk through, hounded by plastic skeletons and fake blood, a mechanical scream and crackling. It's exhausting. I don't even flinch. I know it as the teacher dismisses us for the day with a warning to be careful trick-or-treating tonight. Beware of pranksters and child snatchers and people who put razor blades in candy. Stay with your friends or a trusted adult. Come home at a reasonable hour. Don't make yourself vulnerable to strangers. I know it as the teacher is talking nonsense, that trick-or-treating isn't risky or dangerous. It's an excuse. It's an opportunity. I know that statistically speaking, you're far more likely to be harmed by a family member than a complete stranger. Same goes for kidnapping. I know it as I walk the streets that night, clutching my worm pillowcase, wrestling with rappers, and hope against hope that day, reality will defy the odds. That I'll be taken. That some lunatic in a white van will come up behind me, grab me, throw me in his trunk. I know it as I realize the front porch lights of all the houses are turned off. It's time to go home. For the first time today, I feel fear. I know it as I walk home as slowly as possible and think about next year. I'll be in high school. People will begin to look at me funny when they answer the door. They'll say I'm too old. It's okay. I'll just wear this ghost costume again so no one sees my face. And I'll do the same thing the year after that. I'll do it for as long as I have to. I know it as I scramble to suck down as many candies as possible while I can. Damn, no razor blades. I hear footsteps. Halloween ain't scary. It's a special time of year. The leaves have started to change color and blanket the ground below the now bare trees. The fronts of the supermarkets are lined with decorations, costumes, and candies. The spirit Halloween stores, timely specters that they are, reanimate and set up shop all across town. And every year, as the season begins to creep up on us like a routine plague, I think the same thing. God, I hate Halloween. There's always so much work to do, and somehow, despite the weeks of warning, it always seems to creep up on me. Take this year for instance, a week away, and I've only just settled on the perfect house. It's easy if you know where to look. This year, I settled on a 2-story at the end of the one-way street, who lives out of town, put it up for market after their house flipping project ran out of money. Their asking price was too high, so it quietly sat on the market for a while. Sad for them, perfect for me. Of course, my work has only just begun. I need to get decorations for the front entry, supplies for the harvesting, a van for transportation, candy for trick-or-treaters, and a fake ID for any police officers who come by. It'll all be worth it in the end. See, when the light's on out front, the children come knocking. Some have parents, others travel with friends, and an unfortunate few walk the dark streets of Halloween night all alone. Halloween is the best holiday of the year. No, not because of sweets and costumes, though the outfits that some people come up with are really something, but because of the excitement. Everyone is anticipating the coming holidays, no one more so than yours truly. You see, I'm a pumpkin farmer. It's sort of a tradition at this point. Each generation has improved and upgraded the business, making it grow bigger and better every time. This year, it's my go. I spent the last 2 years on this plan now, and it's gonna make the biggest, best pumpkin patch you'll ever see. You see, my invention is a seed, but not just any seed. I made them so that all they need to grow is a little soil, and they'll be growing faster than a weed and manure. My pumpkins will be the best in town. No one will stand a chance. Currently, it's Halloween night, and I'm waiting to try out my babies. That is what they are at this point. I spent so long loving them and nurturing them. I wait in my house for the first visitor to arrive. I hear the doorbell and go to open the door. I'm met by a lone girl, about 16 or 17. She's dressed in a short cheerleader dress, covered in blood. Fake. I know real blood when I see it. And currently trying to discreetly hide the cigarette she has smoking. Trick or treat, she says, looking completely bored out of her mind. I smile at her, but she doesn't react. Instead, holding out her hand, obviously gesturing for sweets. My smile doesn't falter as I give her a single chocolate piece, nor when she huffs in annoyance and struts down my garden path, stopping only to flick her half-lit cigarette into my flower bed and eat the piece of chocolate I gave her. It doesn't falter when she starts to choke and turns around in horror and confusion, showing the large, pumpkin-sized lump in her stomach, slowly growing larger and larger with each terrified breath she takes. When she collapses on the ground, the pumpkin having finally ruptured her stomach and torn through her skin, I smile wider. My baby's worked wonderfully. I turn to go back inside my house, but out of the corner of my eye, I see a young boy walking up the path, candy bag in tow, completely oblivious to the corpse just feet away from him, hidden under a sea of vines and an island of pumpkin, smiling just as happy as I am. It seems I had another walking bag of soil up for grabs. I hold up my chocolate, my babies, excitement building as I imagine how big this pumpkin patch will be. Halloween really is the best holiday of the year. Thomas hated Halloween. It's a combination of everything he disliked. Crowds, darkness, and fake monsters. Fake monsters were the worst though, because how do you even know if it's fake? There was one silver lining to the day he dreaded: candy. Tommy could never resist the sweet treats. Since his mother never passed them out or anything to the neighborhood children, going house to house was the only option. After finally finding the courage to go trick-or-treating, he started down the street. The pumpkin costume his mother had stuffed him into was a bit tight, but he waddled persistently. It didn't take long to fill the bottom of the plastic pumpkin with licorice and jawbreakers. Most of the houses just left the lights on without adding any extra decorations in their yard. Those were the places he felt more comfortable approaching, but they never seemed to be giving away anything good. With searching eyes, Tommy noticed the strobe light of a home not too far away. The place seemed to have a decent amount of money, according to their display. Tommy's shaky legs dragged him slowly towards the house. As he approached the yard, he could make out more than an impressive scene. At the front gate, barbed wire was weaved around the archway. At least 3 different types of strobe lights flashed brightly, giving everything an old movie effect. To the left of the large tree stood something that took the breath out of Tommy's mouth. The decorative creature stood at least 2 stories high. Its stretched, pale green flesh shone in the moonlight. The twiggish body ended with a rotting pumpkin head. Its face pointed downwards at its vine-like fingers. The appendages held a mannequin child about the same age as Tommy. The child's torso was ripped down the middle in a grotesque fashion. At the creature's feet laid full-size candy bars and fake blood. Fake monsters. Tommy heard a voice in his head remind him of the fact. Despite that, his heart was still thundering loudly in his pudgy chest. A neighborhood kid's laugh broke in the distance and snapped him from his frightened trance. Fake monsters, he told himself, and started walking towards the scattered treasure. Fake monsters, he kept reminding himself. The thing's legs not far away. Then Tommy suddenly remembered something. He turned around, back towards his home, and could barely see it in the distance. He looked back at his shoes, just as the thought broke. Why didn't he recognize these decorations? Before terror finally set in, a body fell in front of his feet. The corpse splattered blood across the orange outfit. A scream had barely left his mouth when the world was ripped out from under him. The vines wrapped around his body, then began to rip. Thomas's last comprehensible thought was that he heard talking in the distance. Let's check out that house. They gotta have good stuff. Unless you're scared. Then the fake monster tore open his body. Two days after Christmas, and no great stir was through the house. The done-to-death holiday tales were coming to an end, thankfully. I waited for the tales of killer snowman and invaders who aren't Santa Claus to fade away from the internet's craving eye. Everyone was at work or gone home, and it was just me and my computer, which is why I want to regale the web with yet another holiday tale. I have a neighbor, a strange old cross-eyed man who we'll call Mr. Halloween. He's harmless, I think. The neighborhood I live in, despite being a rough town, is very peaceful. Only once has a house been robbed here, and when the perpetrators were caught, they were found in the cells completely burned to death. Strange noises emanate from Mr. Halloween's house the night it happened. I don't know how he got that nickname, Mr. Halloween. Maybe it's because he's a spooky guy, but no one knows his real name. My parents don't talk about him. Kids stay away from his house. I often chant a hello in the mornings, and he'll just look at me with his emerald eyes and a grunt. That's okay though, because I'm neighborly, and someone interacts with the old man, everyone wins. What's strange to me is that on Christmas night, every year there's a great commotion about his house. Generally I just ignore it, but this year I chanced to look through his curtains. All I saw through his window was him dressed in his Sunday best in the living room of his house, talking to someone. The next night, as I wake up at 3 a.m., someone tries to break in. I saw them try to pry the door, and then I saw a pentagram light up in Mr. Halloween's living room. There is a blood-curdling scream, and the would-be burglar went up in flames. I think Mr. Halloween knows that I saw what happened. I also think he knows that I'm quite grateful. I don't mind it and no one knows. What's wrong with your friendly neighborhood Satanist? But it was truly a month to remember. I first met her when she was carving out a high school bully's eye with a butter knife, and we were more or less inseparable after that. She was a few years older than me, so of course I fell instantly in love, but I knew deep down we were destined for friendship and little else. I knew this deep down because she made it clear that she was going to die in roughly a month. "Can't love a dead chick," she'd say. At first, I just thought it was a clever way of avoiding the awkwardness of turning me down, but at some point, I came close to believing her. It was just something about her, something extremely free, careless, and unconfined, refreshingly brave and outspoken and honest. When I met her, I was going through the most depressing period of my life. I was constantly bullied and belittled at school. My younger sisters were both hospitalized. Each needed a transplant to survive. Jenna needed a heart, Chloe needed kidneys, and my parents had their hands full covering the medical expenses. I think we all in our own ways were on the verge of just giving up, just letting go. I was saved by Michelle. I had no doubt about it. If she hadn't shown up when Brett was beating the shit out of me, I would have killed myself that day. I was just so sick of it. Sick of the beating, sick of the abuse. Sick of being alone. But Michelle came out of nowhere, threw him into the wall, kicked his nose halfway up his brain, and proceeded to dig his eye out with the aforementioned cutlery. He never touched me again. You'd think she would get into trouble after doing something like that, but it was never reported. Brett claimed it was an accident, that he had crashed his moped. I think he feared that Michelle would kill him if he said otherwise. I, for one, had no doubt she would have. That was just who she was. Michelle never went to school. She said it was because she knew she was gonna die. Why bother with bullshit like school then? No, she was all about enjoying life to the fullest, kicking assholes in the face, fucking over people who fucked over others. She wanted to leave this world a better place than she found it, and by her logic, this was done exclusively by ridding it of shitbags, one way or another. "How do you know you're gonna die?" I asked her once. "My parents tell me every day, and they are good for their word." She wouldn't explain it in detail, just that she was raised knowing the exact date and time of her death, down to the very second, and that it was just meant to be. That's what they told her. In death, her life would have meaning. At first, I didn't think much of it, you know. She was a crazy girl, and always said weird stuff like that. I was kind of banking on it, all being some bizarre joke or something. But when the month drew to a close, I was getting really worried it might be all true. I'd grown too attached to her. Every minute I wasn't at school or at the hospital was spent with her, and the thought of losing her, my only friend, made me horribly depressed. This last week, I was really on edge. My twins were in bad shape, and my parents were spending every waking minute at the hospital. They had yet to find donor matches, and time was running out. It felt like my time was running out too. The dark thoughts were returning, and I started imagining how I would kill myself should Michelle ever leave me. I found it strange that she never invited me home. I mean, friends do that, right? Invite each other over? She had been to our house several times. She's even crashed on the couch a few times, and we would often watch movies there, raid my parents' liquor cabinet, get wasted, and generally just have fun. But I'd never been to her house, not once. I didn't even know where she lived. So one night, I decided to follow her. What was there to lose, really? Maybe I could get some answers from her parents or something. Some way to explain why she's so convinced that she was dying. Maybe they lied to her. Some sort of cult? A way to form her beliefs into accepting the unacceptable. A way to control her. I stalked her for 30 minutes, lurking in the shadows as she paced down the streets. When she headed to the outskirts, I started getting worried, and when she took the narrow trail through the forest, I was almost having a full-on panic attack. Where the hell was she heading? As far as I knew, there weren't any houses for miles. About halfway into the forest, I suddenly lost her. It was like she vanished without a trace. I walked back and forth, up and down, but there was no sign of her at all. Eventually, I had to give up and return home, my mind growing even darker. I remember the last day like it was yesterday, every minute of it, crisp and clear and vivid in my mind. Every scent, every sound, every muscle moving on her perfect face. All those smiles and kind words, everything. The last day came and went, but I didn't know it was the last day. If I'd known, I would have told her how much I cared for her, how much she meant to me, how much I owed her my life and sanity. Without her, I wouldn't be alive. But I didn't know, and I never told her. I hope she somehow realized it, and that she could see it in my eyes and my actions every day, but I can never be sure. She just acted normal, you know? She was Michelle that day too. Same carefree spirit, the same wild, devil-may-care attitude. We spent the afternoon smoking weed, watching silly cartoons, laughing and enjoying each other's company. But when she left, I knew something was up. I don't know how. I guess there was some detail, some little thing that alarmed me. But having replayed and analyzed that day over and over again in my mind, I can't think of anything. Nothing. But I knew. So I followed her again. This time, I stayed closer, always having her in my sights, always knowing exactly where she was. She was walking considerably slower that night, almost like she knew I was behind her, almost like she wanted me to follow her. The air was cold and crisp, and whenever autumn draws close, I can step outside, take a deep breath, and relive the exact moment when she suddenly turned on her heels to face me. "This is it," she said. "This is the day I die." She walked over to me and handed me an envelope. It was light, but there was definitely something in it. A letter, perhaps. "You will need this." She stroked my hair gently. "When the time comes, you'll know what to do with it." "I don't understand," I said. "Please, let's just leave. Let's just get out of here." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. If I concentrate real hard, I could still conjure up the smell of her perfume. "This is goodbye," she murmured softly. "But you will come to understand that it was always meant to be." I reached out to hug her when they emerged from the darkness. Two tall figures clad in dark robes, an old man and an elderly woman, their milky white hair flowing gently in the breeze. They had this solemn expression on their face, the kind you see at funerals, an expression of acceptance to sorrow and despair, because it's just a part of life. Michelle pushed me away forcefully, and by the time I regained my balance, it was already too late. Her throat had been slit from either side of her neck, a perfect cross, left to right, right to left. Blood was squirting out, coloring the dull brown of the roadside a deep shade of crimson. The robed couple swiftly stepped back into the shadows, leaving me desperately clutching the lifeless body of Michelle, screaming my lungs out, wailing like an animal into the cold night. The paramedics came out later. I have no idea who called them. She had no ID on her, so they asked a bunch of questions. I didn't know the answers to any of them. She was Michelle, that's all I knew. Her name was Michelle, she was my friend, and she was the best person I've ever met. The ambulance let me ride with her to the hospital, but quickly pronounced her dead. She lost too much blood, they told me. It wasn't my fault, there wasn't anything I could have done, but this didn't offer much comfort. I was devastated, totally broken. The dark thoughts resurfacing once again, this time with much more power than before. "What's in your hand?" one of the paramedics asked. "Does it belong to Michelle?" I glanced at the envelope. It was completely drenched in blood, much like me. And then it suddenly hit me. I don't know what it was, but it was like she told me, when the time comes, you'll know what to do with it. So without thinking, I just handed it over to him. He sort of held it up, like somehow he could see through it if he got a better angle of it, before he gently opened it. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. I'm better now. I still have lots of problems understanding what happened, but I am doing better. I have come to terms with it, with the fact that everything happened just the way it was supposed to happen, and it has shaped me, shaped my life into what I am today. Michelle didn't just save me, she saved my entire family, every aspect of my life, and I'm guessing you're wondering what was in the envelope. Maybe you have figured it out, maybe not. It was a donor card, and as it turned out, she was a perfect match for my twin sisters. "Can't love a dead chick," she said. That's the only thing she was ever wrong about.